You're listening to Adoptees On, the podcast where adoptees discuss the adoption experience. This is episode 194, Adoptee Remembrance Day. I'm your host, Haley Radke. Because of the subject matter of today's episode, I want to give a content warning that we will be mentioning suicide, self-harm, sexual assault, and other triggering topics during this episode. I will have links to crisis hotlines in the show notes, so please do take a moment to consider your well-being while deciding whether or not it's safe for you to listen to this episode. Adoptee Remembrance Day is commemorated annually on October 30th to acknowledge adoptees who have died by suicide, crimes committed against adoptees by adoptive parents, adoptees who are without citizenship, adoptees who have been rehomed or otherwise had their adoption disrupted, adoptees who are overrepresented in recovery facilities for addiction, adoptees who struggle with mental health issues, and to recognize adoption trauma and the loss of our genetic connections and access to our families of origin. To honor adoptee voices, to honor your voice, I asked you to send me your thoughts on what Adoptee Remembrance Day means to you. Let's listen in.
Hi, my name is Stephanie, and on this Adoptee Remembrance Day, I would like to acknowledge the loss of adoptee lives. I knew a fellow adoptee that lost her life due to substance abuse, which is all too common a story in the world of adoption. I would also like to acknowledge and reflect on all of the adoption-related losses in our lives. The biological grandparents we never got to meet, the parents we only met once we were adults, or didn't find in time to meet at all, the biological siblings that we didn't get to grow up with. I'd also like to acknowledge the loss of the lives we could have led without the effects of adoption trauma, the healthy relationships that we were unable to establish, the time that was spent consumed by depression and substance abuse. Time is a limited and extremely valuable resource. We could have been doing amazing things with our time and even our lives if so much energy wasn't being expended just trying to survive. To be an adoptee is to live every day with tremendous loss. On this Adoptee Remembrance Day, I would like for us to acknowledge all of our losses and give ourselves some grace as we do our best to navigate our adoptee journeys.
Feeling grief over the story that was written here, which was all I grew up with. And a lot of the things, now that I've found my family and found my story, I know to be just completely made up, including heritage, culture, strange, tiny details like hobbies and likes. It's as if they were just playing, these social workers. The story that it was my mom's fault, that she decided she couldn't do it, in deep contrast with their same private typewritten notes that I got a hold of 10 years later that share that she didn't know we were being taken, and she looked for us frantically after we were taken in the hospital. Countrywide birth lists in Canada need to be abolished. They are clear, intergenerational hunting and intentional trauma. My mom is a kind and loving person, and she didn't decide to give me up when I was in her womb. She gave me her love, and remembering that love is what got me through the fog and to the other side. Leaving this false narrative typed neatly on these few pages was a great loss. I lost everything that was my adoptive family. Because if you don't run with that fake story, you lose them. But if you don't find your own story, you lose yourself. And my soul in this lifetime was more important than pretending.
From Emma Stevens. I'm missing my brother today, who got swallowed up by the complexities and trauma of being an adoptee. My love to all and our tireless dedication for adoption reform and re-education.
Hi, I'm Krista. I'm a 28-year-old adopted person from Ohio, and I would be honored to share in the light with other adoptees in remembrance of those who have died by suicide, those who still don't and are still fighting for citizenship, those who have gone through abuse, rehoming, addiction. The list is long, and it all deserves attention and deep reflection. There's one thing I'd like to share that's close to my own heart. It's adoptees that are struggling with mental illness like myself. I struggle with depression and anxiety, and with the statistics out there about us, I know it's hard to not feel like the odds are against us and makes us feel more isolated than we already are and how we already feel sometimes. We deal with a specific type of pain and loss that deserves to be acknowledged. I struggle with the isolation daily, and maybe this will help you feel less alone. I wanted to spread a message of hope today. I want you all to know that your pain is valid, you're loved, wanted, and needed here. We need each other to help keep advocating for our voices to be heard and not snuffed out. The type of empathy we carry is a strength and superpower that is unmatched and needs to be shared with the world. This community has brought me out of the shadows on my darkest days. So stay strong and remember, if the burden gets too heavy to carry, we have an amazing community who will help us shoulder the pain. A day like today is a stark acknowledgement from this community that all of this is valid, so just remember that. Thank you so much, and sending every adoptee much love and healing today.
So my Adoptee Remembrance Day is a little bit different than others because I think adoption holds a lot of trauma in general to all parties involved. So I have recently lost my biological mother after searching for so many years, a good portion of my adult life. And after many secondary rejections, she ended up passing away right after I found her. And so the grief I now live with is really hard and different than a typical grief of loss, because I felt like I had lost her so many times. And then I finally got to her, and then she passed. So I remember her. I realize that's not remembering an adoptee, but I think the trauma that the biological mothers go through also is really heartfelt and needs some explanation too in most cases. So that would be my Adoptee Remembrance Day note. Secondary rejection and I have become very, very good friends. And then for her to go ahead and pass away, it's just icing on the cake. It's just a sad, tragic ending to a story full of, unfortunately, her leaving me behind time and time again.
There is a myth perpetuated by adoption agencies to birth parents or first parents that by putting a child up for adoption, they're offering that child a better life, when in reality, they're only offering the child a different life. There is no quote unquote better life. When a child is adopted, they're supposed to blend into the adopted family and not have questions or wonder about that birth family or that first family, but just to move on and be part of the adopted family. But when a child is kidnapped, they're supposed to reject that adopted family, that family that's kidnapped them. They're supposed to long for that reunion with their birth family, their first family. And to a child being adopted and being kidnapped, they're experiencing the same thing. The only difference is society has made one legal and one illegal.
Hey Hey y'all, I'm Alicia from Alabama. Adoptee Remembrance Day is important to me because there has not been a day of my life that I wish I didn't exist. I chose to stay. I felt so guilty for having these compulsive daily thoughts. Just guilt. Most days weren't consumed with thoughts of actively ending my life, but a great number have been. Most days, this looked like apathy, and my internal dialogue was just about wishing to not exist or just not be here anymore. I thought I was the only adoptee that felt this way because society tells a completely different story about adoption, and this is what most people believe. But it turns out I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the outlier. I just stayed. Adoptee Remembrance Day is important because the adoptees that couldn't stay deserve to be remembered, and the narrative needs to be changed. It needs to be changed by adoptees. And I will remember. And I will tell others. I was able to stay. So many aren't. This is adoption. This is the truth. And I will remember.
Hi, my name is Deanna. As a 53-year-old adoptee just coming out of the fog, I send healing thoughts to all adoptees and relinquished persons this day. Healing for all of us who are connected by virtue of being assigned different identities and separated from our birth mother. Our situations are vastly different. Perhaps we weren't convenient, or maybe used as a commodity to fill others' needs, or were ripped from a culture and placed in a foreign environment. In my case, I'm the daughter of a predator who not only molested my mother, but my 7-year-old sister. I also send blessings to those who feel completely at peace with existence in their adopted situation. May grace and peace be with us all.
Hello, my name is Sarah Swoboda, and I'm a domestic adoptee from the United States. I was adopted when I was an infant. I grew up in Western Massachusetts, and I moved to Arkansas when I was 18 to be in reunion with my birth mother and birth father. And as of this past summer, I am no longer in reunion with my birth family, not my birth mother's side. We're not speaking anymore. And when I saw the prompt for this recorded contribution, I thought about how much relief I've felt since my reunion ended, because I no longer have to pretend that I'm okay, and I no longer have to live completely immersed in a story that turns me into an open wound. I was suicidal for most of my adolescence. My body is covered in scars. And when I think about the connection between suicidal ideation, self-harm, disordered eating, skin scratching, hair pulling, everything that I see occur amongst adoptees I know so often, I also think about how few non-adopted people I know are able to tolerate or humor the idea that there might be a connection between the experience of adoptees and that kind of suffering. I have had a very hard time lately realizing how I can't talk to non-adopted people about the connection between my struggles with suicidal ideation and my struggles as an adoptee. They just don't get it. And I think I've more come to terms with the fact that they don't get it, but I wish I wish that I could let out my frustration more and say and more clearly point out that lack of awareness and just be able to say, you don't understand. You don't understand this kind of suffering, and that's okay, but I wish you would at least acknowledge that you don't understand.
I listened to these messages multiple times in order to produce this episode and decide what order they were going to be in. And all the while, I just kept thinking, I just love us. I love adopted people. Even through the pain of all the different things that these folks shared with us today. And thank you. Thank you for being willing to share those thoughts. There's a generosity, right, of being willing to share a part of their story with us and share a part of their pain. And I always hope that with our sharing comes this, hopefully, like community lightening. I feel like that when I interview someone, that hopefully I've lifted a little bit of something off of them. So in order, when you acknowledge someone's experience, validate their experience, and they feel seen, that hopefully a little bit of the pain lightens. I remember last year on the first Adoptee Remembrance Day feeling very heavy all day, and like there was this just weightiness and sorrow. And then the moments I had planned to connect with fellow adoptees, we did a couple of online meetups, and I just felt like this deep love for adopted people. I guess it's because I know what it feels like. And so when cheesy warning alert, this will sound cheesy probably. And I hope it doesn't sound insincere, because I truly mean it. You're so worthy of being here, no matter what your experience is or what you've done or any of the things that might make you feel less than in some fashion. And though I may not know you specifically, I still feel I do. And so it is with deep sincerity that I tell you that I love you, and I'm thankful you're in this world. And I'm thankful for each person in the adoptee community. I wish you weren't in the adoptee community. I wish you could have stayed with your original family if it was safe and welcoming and loving for you to do so. And yet, here we are. This jumbled up folks who live with trauma and sometimes, including me, act out of that trauma and cause harm to ourselves or the people that are in our lives. And yet, I'm still so thankful for you and to be a part of this community. I know that the founder of Adoptee Remembrance Day, who is Pamela Karanova, she also founded Adoptees Connect, which is a network of adoptee connect groups where you can get together with other adoptees and just talk about adoption things. I co-facilitate one here in Edmonton, and I know there are groups all across the United States and some international groups. So if you go to adopteesconnect.com, you can find hopefully one near you, or you can start one yourself. Pamela wanted to have Adoptee Remembrance Day right before November, because November initially was chosen as Adoption Awareness Month for this push to make sure that kids in foster care didn't age out of the system without some sort of family permanence. And it's morphed into this month-long celebration of all things adoption. And of course, listening to these voices that we just have, it often feels like there is nothing to celebrate about adoption. And so November can be extremely challenging for adopted people online. And there's people writing prompts, and you've got the day with the happy face smile on the palm of your hand. And it's very triggering for a lot of people to be in those online spaces during November. And so my friend, Reshma McClintock, she's the founder of Dear Adoption. We've been talking about all these different ways of how can we support adopted people? How can we show up for each other in community, even though most of us are coming from broken places and aren't always, showing up as our best selves. And so we decided that for November, we would start a hashtag called Dear Adoptees. So see what we did there? Dear Adoption / Adoptees On, Dear Adoptees. And we'll be giving some prompts throughout the month. This is not going to be an everyday thing. This is not going to be us being like, okay, it's day 1. Let's post the hands with frowny faces. We're not doing that. We will have some prompts throughout the month where we will invite you to join in writing something, Dear Adoptees, something that is loving, community building, supporting, saying that you're an ally for adopted people. I hope you'll join us for that. If it feels like something that would be have a positive impact for you. So you'll see more of that if you're following Adoptees On any of our social media. So just at Adoptees On or links in the show notes. Also, Dear Adoption is usually at Dear Adoption, and I'll have links to Dear Adoption in the show notes as well. So I hope that you participate. Hashtag Dear Adoptees. So that is our November acknowledgement of showing up for each other in community, and not as an activism thing, not as we got to show them we're adoptees and we're here. It is supposed to be a nourishing kind of thing. So I hope we do a good job of that for you. So last thoughts. I have this written down in my office because as soon as I heard it, I was like, this is the mantra. This is what I need. I heard Gabor Mate share this, and I've shared it before on the podcast. So if it's a repeat, then that's good. You need to hear it again. He shared in a seminar about relinquishment trauma that life wants life, and life wanted you. And I believe that. So I'm glad you're here. Sincerely, I love you. Thank you for honoring adoptee voices with me. Let's talk again next Friday.